welcome everybody to Recruiting is No Joke. I am your host, the realist recruiter. Super excited to be here. Got another great guest, another talent acquisition leader that leads organizational team internal. So super excited to hear from Matt Lowney today. Matt, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
You too. I appreciate you making time for me. I feel like I've been a perpetual reschedule, so I appreciate your patience and making time.
I rescheduled on you because I was going to go on a field trip, and then we got another time.
Then you went to the zoo. Didn't go to the zoo. There was something in there. The zoo was involved.
Yeah, we were going to go to the zoo, and my daughter is currently at the zoo up in Milwaukee. So shout out to Milwaukee. It's 45 degrees and raining, but the school...
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Recruiting is No Joke. This episode was brought to you by Interactive EQ, a one-of-a-kind talent assessment platform that measures how people would handle real-life situations. The assessments can be best described as an interactive, movie-like experience where the talent plays a first-person character in the story. You can check out what they do here at www.interactiveeq.com and tell them that Joel sent you. We all know that hiring is so much more than just a resume, and now you can find out how candidates will actually react in real-life situations. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it, and you're definitely going to want to check it out. Now, back to this week's episode. Thanks so much again. We couldn't do it without you.
Her school was like, your car's not big enough to justify us paying for you to take them. So they kind of opted with the parents who have bigger cars. I got a minivan, so I don't know what could be bigger than that, but apparently someone's got like an 8-seater, so they won. They won.
My wife works for a school, and for that very reason, they signed me up on insurance so I can actually drive the school bus for field trips. And it's one of the worst things I decided ever to do, right? Because I'm becoming completely useful. Like I can take 15 kids anywhere. And so they signed me up as a backup school bus driver. So
what's more challenging, driving school buses or leading talent acquisition?
Yeah, I'd say I actually enjoy the school bus driving, just a break from your day in and day out, the nonsense and total fear of like, hey, all these parents and their kids, they put a lot of faith in a stranger. So I feel like it's more the responsibility of I better not mess this one up, you know?
Yeah, I see you're driving like 15 miles per hour.
Oh, yeah, cool. I'm going another speed limit and I'm staying out of the ditches. That's the goal.
That's good. Well, Matt, look, why don't you give us a quick intro for anyone who doesn't know you? Who are you and what do you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, so Matt Lowney, Managing Director of Talent Acquisition, CoreCivic. So we're in the correctional space, which is a little unique and different, and been here just shy of 3 years. So have both TA, so our team hires 8,000-9,000 people a year, and then also HR out in the field.
Just say that again: 8,000 to 9,000 people a year you're hiring.
Wow. As a volume machine, sometimes too much of a volume, right? And then life before that's 20 years or so in kind of multi-site healthcare recruiting kind of organizations. Being here in Nashville, that is the nature of our industry. And so, corrections is, we still have healthcare, right? So we run the safety side, the things you think a prison has, right? Wardens to correctional officers, but you also think we have a corporate entity that's 400 or so people. And then you have healthcare, our healthcare that we deliver at the same facilities is 2,500 folks. So doctors and nurses and counselors. And so plenty to keep us busy and engaged.
Yeah. You know, going from like that healthcare space to the correctional space you're in now, seems like there'd be some similar challenges there. So what are some of the similarities between the hiring that you're doing right now?
So I would say where it's similar is a multi-site game, right? I think just folks who are operators and people who, do frontline delivery, it's actually not that different, right? In many ways, there's less variety of roles. At a hospital, there's, hundreds and hundreds of different roles. At a correctional entity, I would say 90% of our roles fall into 4 or 5 different positions. So in many ways, that's easy. The thing that we learned here over the last 3 years is we got to get out of our own way, right? So just purely the exercise that we focus on here is processing. Like how do we, and that's what I've been hearing when we got here 3 years ago. Just our conversion rates are really low. Our time to do anything, right? Time to offer, time to hire, time to start was all off. And then how do we morph into doing more thoughtful spend around advertising, and then when and how we engage with sourcing. So from that, it's been a really interesting journey for the last 3 years, is just kind of digging into kind of every piece of this thing.
So what does like what's like the length of like the hiring cycle for a typical role that you're working on, like from somebody applying to getting an offer?
Oh, so, our correctional officers, it is time, the way we look at it is time to paycheck, right? So that's kind of the key measure for us. So subdivide that, right? Time to offer. So if we'll do hiring events, right, we'll do same day offers, and then we have a pretty intense kind of background screening, as you might imagine. We've gotten that tightened up. And then we get them to first day. I'd love to get them to put on the cadence of the training academies within 3 weeks. Sometimes it can be as little as 10 days. And then training academies can be 8 to 13 weeks. So that's kind of when they actually, after that, they're doing the job. So ideally, we're getting them into training within 14 days, right? And many times it's much, much less than that, depending on our priorities.
Yeah, makes sense. And you talked about the advertising. So curious, like what that looks like, how you're attracting talent, because I can imagine, I don't know necessarily. I mean, I suppose I know some people who've gone into being like correctional officer or working within that space, but what are some of the challenges there, and like what are some of the approaches that you're taking to attract talent into the space?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I always have this conversation is facilities where everybody has multi-site facilities that have higher turnover than others, and those that do have high turnover. It's this sense that we're missing out on the talent pool of folks who have a predisposed desire, ability, DNA, whatever, to be a correctional officer. And once you get into it, it's really not the case, right? I mean, I look at it much differently. They put correctional entities typically in rural communities, and people drive no more than 50 miles. We've kind of figured that out. So I say, Warden, we've got to recruit from 50 miles to the facility, and we pay what we pay, and that's usually pretty solid for our communities we're in. It's getting them in there and convincing them. Like I always say, well, the reason they come versus the reason they stay is vastly different. I can get them there, right? I can get them to start. Our team is built together, kind of a hiring machine. It's then once they get here, how do we train them and how we treat them, right? No different than a lot of places really at the end of the day. But we're not going to win the game by saying, oh, there's a certain percentage of the population that goes, boy, being a correctional officer has some kind of tangible kind of connectivity to how I'm wired. But then you ask the other piece, kind of advertising piece is we spend $400,000 plus every single month, give or take, on kind of recruitment advertising, and certainly accountable for that, how that money's spent. And we've retooled a couple of times, like how we do media planning, which I don't want to totally nerd out on, but it's right online and offline. And then online, right, it's a mix of direct response ads and job boards and Indeed. And then how do you say that? Plus we have billboards and we run radio ads, which are not that kind of click tracking. And how does all that interplay in terms of kind of what they call it multimodal advertising or omni-channel advertising? What's the most effective use of those dollars in that community? Because it's different. And so we have a model for that we look at and say, okay, money in applies out, to keep it real simple. And then the dials within really dictate a kind of constant test, right? So what's finally getting us a conversion rate or apply rate that works for us. So
yeah, I love that. Love that. It makes sense. What obviously you've been in recruiting for a while. So what got you into recruitment in the first place? Like walk me through that journey.
I mean, like most of us, right? We just stumbled into it. I needed a job out of college, and had a friend who worked for a staffing firm, and he said, "Hey, this works out well." And so, yeah, that's like everybody else didn't intend to do it. Glad I did. Certainly, have enjoyed the journey. But yeah, I've got a degree in biology and chemistry. Haven't used that for 1 minute of my professional life. I think you find that with most folks, particularly in recruiting roles, right? That they didn't really intend to do this thing. They just kind of stuck at it.
Yeah. Well, you started in staffing. Did you originally intend to stay in staffing, or you were always like, hey, I know I want to go internal? Like what did that journey look like?
Internal early, right? I kind of looked at it and go, my exposure was our clients we work with. I was like, boy, I like their job better than mine. Obviously, there was reasons for that. I think most of it was particularly in my early 20s. I don't think doing sales was particularly, kind of was my core DNA. On this side, it's much more about problem solving, right? And it's particularly, I tell folks at this point, I really don't do much recruiting anymore. I spend my time in presentations and Excel and monitoring processes and implementing workflows and. So as you've kind of gone along the journey, right, the job itself has changed as kind of somebody in TA, right? So it went from doing the job and doing it pretty well, then leading a team and then doing that pretty well, then, getting plugged in with the analyst team to go, well, how should we be looking at that? So that's kind of just the path, right? I think it's pretty similar once you get on the corporate side and move up.
I'm curious in that time frame, what do you think has changed just in terms of, I guess, candidates, what they're expecting? I know one of the things that gets thrown out there a lot is, people don't want to work as hard anymore. Are you seeing that with candidates? And I guess, if you are seeing that, like, how do you get around that? How are you motivating people to work, particularly with, obviously there's a huge push with like things like remote work. Like, are you seeing a struggle with, when you're bringing people in or when you're interviewing, are you seeing those types of trends yourself? Have you seen that shift?
I mean, to some degree, I would say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy largely, right? I don't want to dismiss it. Fundamentally, most folks do want to work from home, and I know there's been a movement to RTO, at the end of the day. But I'll say particularly, pre-COVID to now, right? I always say that the work from home movement COVID was not a test case for that, right? It just was a necessary part of businesses continuing, and then people liked it. Some didn't, but vast majority did like it. And then employers brought people back, and then employees got kind of sideways with their motives. And I said, I finally have gotten to the point where motives aside, why does it matter, right? I look at it as much simpler than that. Your employer says this is the dynamics of working here, and you decide whether I'm going to do that or not. Full stop. Yep. I don't need to use one more brain cell on, is it because we own a building and they got to rationalize expense, or they believe culture of proximity matters than culture of remote. They didn't ask me, didn't ask my vote. They don't ask my say. I'm not going to space the time. Like if it's a rule set I don't want to work with, then I go find a job somewhere else that makes sense for me in my situation. And I think that's where people spend a lot of energy on kind of this kind of why. And I don't quite understand spend the energy. But I will say, there's two dynamics that we deal with. The generational piece is, hey, everybody says, I have not got that sense of negativity towards Gen Z and whoever else, kind of alpha or whatever's coming after it in terms of their work ethic. That is one benefit of doing this for a little while. Every generation's come out. Everybody's complained that they're lazy and they don't do anything. And they, and then
totally. I remember when I was coming into the workforce, LinkedIn was literally full of articles that said, "How do you manage millennials?" And it was like, millennials are living in their parents' basements. Millennials are entitled and they play video games. That was like every single article on LinkedIn.
That's right. And that's the same thing here, right? I think that's why we kind of try to condemn Gen Z. It's like the millennials grew up, so they're going to blame the Gen Z, right? And at some point, the Gen Z folks are going to be like, hey, they're in charge. I just feel like it's more of a reflection of just maturity, right? You grow up. Like I wasn't ready to manage people when I was 23, and I'm sure my boss probably thought I was some lazy jerk. And then, in 27, 28, I had a first team and we'd hire my young folks. And of course they were all, and I just think part of it was just the grace and the reality of getting into the workforce and growing up and taking on responsibility. And you know what, we've all figured it out. I've yet to see a generation just totally drop the ball and go, well, we're not working. That's my kid's problem and my parents' problem. Like it's not viable. I mean, it's just in the day, reality sets in, you get bills, all of a sudden you get a harsh slap in the face, of I got to take care of responsibility, and we rewire and we adjust to it. So
you have some kids and then it's just all over.
They love to eat. I found the kids love to eat, and the mortgage likes to get paid, and I like to have a house. And so, you just kind of, you get to it, right? And I think that's where, where we try to, I think it's just more sensationalized. It's one of those like, and also what we work with is the rural urban thing. And I will say, even in rural markets, I have leaders who go, young kids don't want to work. Yes, they do. Your kids, they said the same thing about you 20 years ago. I'll say that to our leaders. But rural folks don't have the option to work in offices or be remote workers as much. So they understand, like I live in middle of nowhere, Indiana, right? And I need a job, and I need a job that pays well. They go, I don't think, well, am I going to be a remote? No. They just know they're going to get on their feet and go to work. And so I don't face that as much in the rural dynamics because they're alternative. They don't have the other option.
And these are and a lot of these jobs, I mean, I would imagine most of them outside of the corporate roles, potentially, most of the roles are going to be like hands-on with people. Yeah. It's hard to be a correctional officer remotely.
You can't be a virtual. I mean, it's like hospitals, right? You can't outsource a remote or virtual in as a bedside nurse. Like somebody's still got to put a needle in this guy's arm, and somebody's got to hook him up to this equipment or whatever they've got to do. And so, And
what about from like a demand standpoint in terms of like one of the things I've noticed, and this might just be an observation from being a content creator and then also having a lot of conversations and then just paying attention to some of the trends that I see in the news, it does seem like there's more of a, I guess, like a demand or a desire for flexibility and control when it comes to work life, right? Whether that's schedule. I mean, obviously, we just talked about remote in office. That's obviously not that applicable. But what I think about, like, having flexibility over your schedule, having some sort of control. Are you running into that? And do you think that even in your type of work environment, like, are there ways that you're able to make things more flexible, or is that something you guys are like thinking about?
So to the degree that we can, we will. So correctional officers, I'd also say many ways no, right? In fact, I'd say they would say that they get held over from shift from time to time more than they like, and that's out of their control fundamentally. On the nursing side, the market has created that, right? So we have, when I got here, we basically had no PRN, this flex staffing. I'd say now 25% of our shifts are picked up by folks who are by job code PRN nurses, right? So they don't want to work all the time.
So these like travel nurses then?
No. So they're local nurses who we pay a premium that work sometimes 8 hours a week, sometimes 40 hours a week, but they are flex. They're not a full-time dedicated staff member, right? They are on our payroll, but they are, think part-time, but a little even more flexible than that. But that's allowed us to add more nurses. It means that we don't have to have travelers. It's avoided overtime expenditure. So there's a business reason we really invested into hiring, those nurses. We probably have hired 600-700 of them the last couple of years, but they work the equivalent of 150 full-time nurses, right? That's kind of the way we've looked at it. That saves us it gives us staffing. At the end of the day, pragmatically, we just need staffing. But the other flexibility, I think that at some point people forgot we had flexibility before. I had a baby when I worked, so it was full-time in the office. Guess what? My boss let me go home to go to soccer games and to go to whatever doctor's appointments. And if they were sick, I could work from home. I think people forget we used to have some degree of flexibility before. I mean, none of us were really like, hey, it's 8:01 to 4:59 or you get your head kicked in. I think people forget there was some flexibility. I do think, though, during COVID and the folks who moved home and worked from home, where they really messed it up was they then started redefining when and how they should work without really asking permission, right? Like, I'm here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. COVID hits. My boss, I said, you go work from home. I would have assumed you're going to be 8 to 5, just your desk and your laptop in your house. There was this weird shift that went to, well, so I can work when I want as long as I get my work done. They never actually ran that by their boss or by the company and said, I'm going to reframe. So they created a lot of flexibility that was perhaps not, I don't know the right word is intended, but then that really made them revolt when it's like, no, you got to come to the office and be here 8 to 5. Well, I mean, that went, they took 2 steps forward. This time, like, it took 18 steps back. And that was a thing where I think the folks who really clung to work at home, had they just worked as they worked from home as they did in the office, they'd still be working from home. It was because I'll tell you, I had remote team members when full-time COVID, and I can tell you, it would take forever sometimes to get response in the middle of the day. Teams message, email, phone, text, and be like, 2 hours later, you're like, hey, I was ... whatever, kind of became the canned excuses. And we in managers, that was a way more frequent experience. It wasn't like, once every month. It was multiple times a day. As opposed to in the office, I'd go, hey, Joel, hey, I got something for you real fast. Walked over there and be like, hey, what's going on with this? And ask a question, be done. I don't know if that's a condemnation of how you manage or how you want to structure, but sometimes things just are easier if you can just walk over,
I think with, like, when you explain that to, or when you're kind of relaying that to me, I think the first thing in my mind goes to what you said before, where a lot of times if the work from home, was kind of happened because of the pandemic and that's why it happened, versus, hey, we're going to build the company like this, and then we're going to set really clear expectations and guidelines, and this is how we operate. So I think, but I can see where I think there's so many factors that go into that. But it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I'm definitely in that mindset. I'm sure you've seen my content where I'm like, I'm more of the mindset of, if you get the result, if you are getting the results, then
So that's the
why
question
not have the flexibility? But I can understand from like a business leader's point of view.
well, not all roles are set up that way, correct? Like recruiting is,
For
right? I can
sure.
tell you, hey, listen, I know my bonus plans are set up. I basically pay you to hire X number of roles, and anything above that, I pay you a bonus, right? At that point, I go, doing 20 hours, I'm not sure how you do. Go for it. If you do it in 60 hours, well, you're slow and whatever. But then the defined role was an outcome. The trick is that's easy to say. It's a binary black and white productivity outcome, right?
Yeah.
The vast majority of jobs are not that way. It's like, I need you to finish this PowerPoint deck. Well, I mean, that's not a measurable outcome. And, then there's pieces. So I think that's the other piece is people started, the word productivity became co-opted. I don't actually know what, I'm more productive at home. Well, no, that's just because you want it to be and you want to work from home. That's not the rationale. Can you show me you are? And a lot of roles don't really have the measures to say you are.
Which is why it's so hard to even when they have studies that show any of this productivity. That's why nothing is conclusive, because so many companies, I talk to candidates, for example, who are looking for jobs right now. And one of the first things I'll ask them is, all right, well, talk to me about what KPIs you had and how your manager would know if you were productive or not.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they're like, I don't even know. We didn't have that. So
that's
it's like, and then you get even more granular with it. And you look at, like, I heard a conversation recently with a company that had 60,000 employees, but they had, 10,000 different job titles. And it was like a lot of the job titles were similar, or a lot of the job titles were different, and they were similar jobs. And, it's crazy to me that can happen. But obviously, the bigger the company you get, the harder it is to focus on what each individual person is doing.
That's also a discipline and job descriptions that they failed. A lot of companies wind up one day, we did that. We woke up one day like, I got 500 job descriptions. There's nobody actually sits in that job. Like, what are we doing here? So let's just delete them all so we don't have to go through them.
Well, they started to put, this is a really good use case for AI, actually. They started to put through all of the job titles and all the descriptions through AI, and then have AI look at, like, could we kind of simplify what these jobs are and like group them easier? So I'm curious from your perspective. We got to talk about AI because it's 2025 and that's all anyone's talking about. What are you thinking about when it comes to AI? What do you think people need to be thinking about from a recruitment perspective, career perspective? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah. So I would say we've thought and talked like everybody else. I'm like, I got kind of tired of that. So we're just doing some stuff. So, I mean, obviously there's the Grok and ChatGPT and rewrite job descriptions, and we do that. And, I look at it kind of right now it's used as I got to log in as a tool, right? I'm logging in and asking it to deliver at least something, to do something. And I'm like, that's kind of the use case.
Co-pilot relationship.
Yeah, there you go. Copilot. We use Copilot too, right? So Copilot. I'm excited and interested more in how does it do stuff without me logging in and telling it to do stuff, right? I look at it, and so we have a PowerPoint workflow deck that says basically in 5 years, this is probably how TA is going to work, right? Person quits, person starts, and in between there, the whole point is how do I have the fewest number of human interactions you possibly can, which seems completely devoid of, positivity, but I apply, right? I even say when the job opens, it triggers a review with comp automatically, right? That could be done through AI. Then that goes, yep. Next thing it goes to, all right, we're going to advertise the job. And then it automatically does A/B testing of advertising and programmatic buying, right? And then that didn't work. We go to sourcing. Then it tests the messaging. That's all done, can be just triggered sequentially all the way through to then agentic AI can do the interviews, which I know right now that's a really cool thing for these guys to try to fake an interview and try to make it look dumb. Actually, is a worry I have around the outcome of the agentic interview.
Well,
have
you seen a couple of those viral videos that have happened?
That's killing
those AI interviews.
It's killing the value of that. My worry is once they get it good, everybody's going to think it sucks, right? Oh, that doesn't work. We tried it. Well, it's because you tried and then they made fun of it. But then I absolutely can score it, right? I've seen it done. Score somebody all the way through, then maybe a hiring manager signs off the offer or talks to the candidate. That might be a human interaction. They say, yep. And that triggers everything downstream that are workflows. And so most things being sold are pieces of that. And we're buying and trying those, like scheduling and interviewing, onboarding. So we're buying and implementing and practicing with that, right? Sourcing, right? But at some point, somebody's going to put all this together in a flow from, cradle to grave that is, continually checking, monitoring, and doing the work of 10 or 15 people. And then the recruiter's job.
It's a lot of this though because where my mind goes to, and I asked this question at a conference not too long ago. This is all for like inbound applications, right? So people who are interested.
Yeah. So that's where I would say sequential, it's a workflow thing, right? So I think your inbounds are advertising, and you go, hey, there's a rule set that says by this date, I haven't received this many qualifications. And it triggers, right? Literally just triggers into the sourcing platform, right? That would go, okay, based on the job description or whatever inputs, right? These are the type of people and all, geographic cuts or whatever compensation requirements, key companies and competitors, right? It reaches out to them, and then A/B tests the messaging on that. It can do that based on a rule set, and it goes until it gets engagement. Someone says yes. You can draw it out in a way that almost kind of scares you. I don't mean that in a negative way insofar as the value, right? Because right now it is about co-piloting tools that make us more efficient and scale us. But concurrently, we are simplifying the roles, right? This is a workflow. Most at this point, I have a scheduler, I have a screener, right? We're building this like an RPO. Once you kind of do that, now the AI tools kind of fit in a lot more nicely, and they're a lot easier to manage. And I think what you're going to wind up with is recruiters become overseers of systems to scale themselves. So I think that's why I think the view of recruiting changes is you got to know the detail. You got to know about what recruiters do and don't do as a job. But also these tools need to be managed. So I think I won't be shocked at some point our roles become very much a infill for outliers, but really we're just sounds bad, but the value organization is hiring people as quickly, the right people as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like it's be more of like a rec ops position where you're managing systems, you're managing tools, you're managing the quality, the output. And then obviously you have workforce planning. I still think there's probably coaching with like working with hiring managers on like how to interview, how to bring people in, how to do onboarding.
So I think that's the thing is that and we become account managers, and I think that's highly valuable. Like a hiring manager, you talk to them, I was like, I don't know what's going on in my rec. I get this one, maybe get a weekly email proactively. I'm like, no, I actually can bring the humanity present to the people who need the tool. Like you don't really need to know the machine in the background and how we're doing this. It's all right, here's the people, here's the process, here's how we humanize it. So I know it's not very dehumanizing, but at some point, humans are talking and work with humans.
There's a lot of the job anyway right now when you think about it that is dehumanized. So if you look at what I would imagine a bulk of recruiters are doing, and I've been in recruitment. I've been more obviously on the agency side looking at what people do, but a lot of what people are doing is a lot of sourcing, which is like reviewing profiles. Last agency I was at in an actual office, the talk time was less than 2 hours a day. So the human interaction was less than 2 hours a day. Everything else was just like
research,
moving people along ATSs. Yeah, research, just doing this stuff, and then reviewing applicants, and then spending time on who's going to be the best people to call. And I think, when I think about what is exciting, I think, okay, it'd be nice to have a tool that could just call all those people, have the conversation, figure out the transcription on that conversation, match it with the resume, and kind of give me a hot list of people that I can move towards the funnel, right?
Interested, engaged, aware, all those pieces. And you could automate. Then that's why I think where we are in this evolution, this thing is right now we have, a lot of the tools are pieces of that continuum. Inversely, I'm not a big fan of one company owning everything from cradle to grave, because like the ATS companies are not necessarily good. HRS systems aren't very good. So you struggle with that. You can't be good at all these pieces. I think ultimately the game becomes, how do I integrate the best scheduler, the best this, and all the pieces work in kind of a cohesive flow. So, I think that's someone will figure that out. It ain't me. That says, hey, I want to, what's the intended outcome of the overall workflow? Now I'm going to go almost test each piece, and then I'm going to set them up so that they work in a way that you can kind of understand what's going on in the ecosystem. And then it becomes utterly scalable. This is why I like for us, we're in a moment of growth, and for some of our facilities, we're scheduling tours. I have a group of people who literally call candidates and say, hey, I've got a tour at this date or this date, and book it. And they remind them and then follow up, and we do text, and we're going to automate a lot of that here soon. But all of a sudden, when that workflow doubles, I've got to double training. I got to make sure that I got a half of them who quit, and half, and all of a sudden, it's a pain as opposed to just upping the volume. Just say, okay, great, same stuff. You just kind of buy more, essentially volume from your vendor, and say, hey, we're going to hire work on 2,000 scheduled candidates versus 1,000 in a month, right? But everything else is the same. So that is the good thing about it, is it does take out the variability of the human factor, which, to be fair, can sometimes be a real pain of management, right? People say dumb things to candidates sometimes, and it bites me.
I think this is something we just have to think about. And in general, I think it's across every single field is, I think recruiting is a great example of this, probably more than any. Maybe the only other one I can think of is sales that would be similar to this. Maybe HR. But, when you think about the complaints that people have about recruiters and about how recruiting is done, a lot of people have, negative feeling about recruitment. And it's at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to get those same complaints about technology, and I think that's something we have to look at as recruiters and go, okay, they're like, for the best example right now is this whole applying for jobs, getting into a black hole.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, an individual human cannot get back to 1,000 applicants. We've got to use technology for that. But it's like the worse that we become as just human recruiters, the more ripe we are, for people that want to automate and bring in technology and at the end of the day, that helps us.
It's just funny you say that. This week that happened. Like, so I had a group of, they weren't here to meet me, but they happened to be in here for an operations meeting. And they got sideways about recruiting. And so they said, hey, come on downstairs. A conference room with like 50 people, and like
downstairs to the basement.
Yeah, to our big conference room is, and I'm like, what are we talking about? So they have some problems with recruiting. I'm like, well, that's a nice tee up with no prepare. So you're just kind of walking in front of the room, and you're like, you get the firing squad, and they had their issue. But it's interesting. So much of what their frustrations were uncommunicated expectations, right? Hey, I have candidates apply internally, and they meet min-quals, and they didn't get an interview, and as their manager, I should know that before. And I'm like, let's think that through. I have 12,000 applies a month, 1,000 are internal employees. Who do you think's making those 1,000 phone calls to say, oh, Joel applied, we're not going to interview him, but here's why, because Joel's probably going to come to you. Like, he's going to get the rejection email, and he's going to go to his boss and go, I'm all sideways. Now, your boss hasn't heard any other part of the story or thought through the process. So they come to me, a la downstairs, and go, well, that's complete crap. Why do we do that? We were told we respect our employees. And so I'm like, I understand the problem we're solving, right? So we are going to change some things around just communication, but also, like, there are limitations to the time and energy. And so, I said, well, I appreciate the problem is stated in such a way I can help with, but it's not going to be the outcome you think it could be. The expectation is like someone here at the corporate office is going to call all these people and have this kind of career defining and developing conversation. Like, I wish I could. I wish 100% they'd give me 50 headcount to do just that. Ain't gonna happen.
Well, the hard thing is with the candidate experience. I remember just years ago, someone on LinkedIn doing a post and just saying, at the end of the day, you got 500 people apply to a job. One person is going to get the job, and they're going to have a great candidate experience. 499 of them are going to have rejection, and rejection just sucks. So it's like, no matter how you do it up. Because I've seen endless conversations. Oh, I need feedback. Well, I know I've given feedback before, and sometimes it's received well, and people go, "Oh, that's helpful." But a lot of times when you deliver the feedback, because it's in there with rejection, and rejection's hard, it then turns defensive and it gets emotional, and you're already dealing with an emotional situation. And then from a company perspective, it's really tough because there's no real ROI that you can point to and say, yeah, this is worth us throwing. We're going to throw $100,000 a year at this, to help with candidate experience. It's
a hard deal.
It's a hard deal until you're on the job search, and then you go through it, and then you're like, when I get to this next company, I'm going to change it all up. And the moment you get the job, you just
dare they talk
about
and like we all have the how dare they talk. No, you're spot on. I do think the rejection emails, and I know companies try to be clever and cute, and I've done that before, and then sometimes direct. My biggest rule thing: if you came on site, you should get rejected via phone. Like, that's always over the years, right? I don't owe anybody that applied online a conversation. I just can't. But if you came on site, you took time out of your time, I took PTO, we probably owe you a call back, which I usually schlep to recruiting and go, hey, I want to let you know. I think the key is, I tell them, I'm not going to bury the lead. We've decided to move forward with somebody else in the role, but I did want to call and let you know that we appreciate your time. And if, from the interview feedback, I can scan real fast. I don't do this big, deep research beforehand. what I do shut down quick is the desire to debate. Well, they didn't understand my answer. The decision is made. Like, this isn't the point for debate. And that's what people have this desire to do, is like, well, I really think they misunderstood what I want to make sure this is a decision made. I do want to do the respective giving of feedback, because I know a lot of companies don't. But also with the understanding there's a certain limitation. I can't say, well, you're just a complete idiot, right? Like, I wouldn't pay you to cut my grass. You kind of have to say, well, but I will give them more than the worst thing would do is, hey, there just happen to be some of this better line of the roll, this kind of nonsense
it's not
crap.
You.
Yeah,
it's not you.
It's us. Yeah,
it's us. Yeah.
So that's it. And at some point, I just move on, right? I kind of give you what I could, and if it gets debatable and whatever, I get better things to burn my energy on too. Because similarly, you get in these days, you just have to give all bad feedback. It can't just drag you down, right? I still got kids to go home to, and meetings to take, and I am very sensitive to. I'm not very sensitive to time or energy. It's the energy. Like, as I've kind of gotten more into this, is what's taking energy away versus what am I allowing to take energy away. Like, that's on me. Like, if you and I have a negative interaction, it allows me to drag on. Like, that's on me to let you do it. I'm like, I'm sorry, it stinks for you, Joel. I hang up the phone and go on to the next thing. And you got to have that separation. I just put
up Glassdoor, and I'll just leave you a negative review. That's How about
fine.
that?
We don't read them anyway. Don't worry about it. No,
I'll go on LinkedIn and tag you, and that'll be perfect.
I think that's the grand candidate retribution. It's also like next door, all my neighbors. So I had a bad, deal with a tree trimming service, and I'm going to put them on blast. I'm like, the problem is, because that's all it's on there, no one pays any attention to it, right? At the end of the day, and short of it being a 1.0 and the company's CEO, fired everybody, when you need a job, honestly, at the end of the day, and I don't mean to sound anybody desperate, you can kind of rationalize whatever's negative. That was their experience, or that was an outlier. You can hear what you want to hear. I think that's where Glassdoor and Indeed rankings haven't cracked the code on their value. And I think candidates who think that, well, you better watch paybacks, you're going to be a bear when the market kicks back up, people won't kind of work here. Not true. People, even the hottest economy, those companies will fill their jobs.
Well, this is something I don't know whether we can dive too deep into it, but I think about this whole idea of, working, almost like working for like a higher purpose. Like, you get sold that a lot. And I think to a certain degree, when you get to a certain point, maybe you're more financially secure, right? So, and you're finally in a point where, like, okay, I'm not necessarily doing the job for money. I just enjoy it. I'm getting a higher purpose. That can happen. I'm not saying that can't happen, but
it's minority.
I feel like the whole time I've been in recruitment, that's what a lot of times companies use that almost when they know they can't pay as much. And then that's when they'll start to say, yeah, but the culture is just so great. And I think the problem is with that is, it's like money talks, right? And it's like, I don't know too many people that are working just for pure like fun and enjoyment. And we have like content creators and motivational people that say that we should be like that. But at the end of the day, it's like we're working to provide, and like I do think there is a satisfaction we get from work, like sure, but it's not like.
Listen, I think
like it replaces everything.
I think the folks are they understand workplace in their life, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. So what is workplace in our actual existence in life, and ultimately, I've known people who have pretty crummy jobs as they're pretty happy with it because they understand the shtick, right? It is because of the money, but it's also like, this is how I'm spending the hours and energy of my life. And I want to make sure I do my best. And at the end of the day, that's good enough. And it's almost like it's fulfilling enough, right? It doesn't have to be like I go to work whistling every day, as long as it's, not this heavy hand. That's where I think, as we all know, like, as long as my boss isn't a complete jerk and makes my life terrible and comes into work trying to make my life harder, I really don't care what business we're in. It's just my work. Does it have meaning to me? And can I do work? But 100% agree. At the end of the day.
Are you seeing a shift in that? Because that's what I was kind of getting to before, like that priority shift with like people. And like, obviously you've been in recruiting a while. So have you seen more of a shift towards people being like, you know what? I just want a job. And like, I want to focus on other things in life. Are you seeing more of a shift like that in society?
I think so. And I also think that employers continue to sell themselves on the sense that culture is a value add. Like I invest $1 in culture, I'm going to save $10 in compensation dollars. In reality, it isn't. Right? That's the thing is I think what we haven't accepted, we're going through this process here right now, is this sense of why you come versus why you stay. Then I think that's our real opportunity as employer is, hey, they come here because the job pays. We're at least honest with ourselves about that. It's incumbent on me to go, okay, there is a higher purpose in our world, right? Is we have very deliberate and intentional career pathing. You can grow here quickly. 98% of the people that work on, that are in our care in our facilities, which is our language, go back out into the communities. Are they better prepared? And we improve recidivism. Are they better prepared? Substance use disorder and skills and all this? And the answer is yes. That's connection. And then we are the biggest employer in most of the cities. So we're the biggest employer, taxpayer, water bill payer, whatever. And so we do make the communities in which we have our facilities stronger. And that has meaning, I think, but that's not why they came there. They came there because the job paid and I need a job, right? So what I want to work on is why they come versus why they stay, and how do I help get them to why they stay quicker.
Man, it's so crazy because I've been doing this podcast. I'll be coming up to, this might actually be episode 100. If it's not, it's like episode 98 or 99. But I haven't heard too many people talk about that. Usually it's lumped into one thing, like usually because that's what EVP is, right? Like the employer value proposition, and they're trying to sell that up front.
Yeah.
So to hear that there's actually two, like I love that. Why did you come here? Why are you staying? And understanding there's two. Now, is there a point where the why you stay kicks in? Because surely it doesn't kick in immediately once they get paid. Like what's that? What does that kind of flow look like?
My analogy, so I've got no math to back this up. So now we're just in math theory ran. So I think at some point you go, when you start telling people at a party what you do or where you do it, that starts to that point of connecting why you stay, right? You're here for 3 or 4 or 5 months. You're still trying to figure out whether you're in it, you're committed to it. You're trying to figure out, but at some point, like we hire a correctional officer, you go from, hey, what do you do? I just work at the prison down the street to, hey, 6 months, a year, and you go, well, what do you do? Oh, I work as a correctional officer, XYZ facility. It's when you start kind of defining yourself by your role or by your employer.
Yeah, it becomes kind of your identity almost.
Not too, I don't want to get too far into identity, but you're right? Where I kind of feel like I say that and can back it up. And my own experience was there, right? I joined this place when I was, at first, hey, I work for the prisons. That's kind of my way of, kind of saying, hey, this is what I do. Now it's, I kind of lead recruiting and field HR for CoreCivic, and talk about them. People ask about kind of what the world's like, and I talk about those kind of 3 things. And we do have money, and I have data to back those up. That's the other thing is we actually have numbers say how many people graduate these programs and how many lives. So we have the stories, the one-off kind of stories to anchor around. Somebody turn their life around, they start a nonprofit, and they do give back to just. How many people got a GED because of us last year? How many people got an HVAC certification? And those are, by the way, the kind of roles that people who get out of prison actually get employed in. That's important. And the recidivism as and bridge of resources and communities. I couldn't have told you all of this 3 months after I worked here. I've had to learn it and I've had to connect to it. And I think it does have meaning. But it's also, is it the reason God put me on this earth? I'm not entirely sure that's the case, right? But it does give meaning to the hours that I put into this, and I can talk to people about it. And I think that's where most employees get, right? I think in Nashville, we have a company called Asurion. A lot of people know it, but I think it's interesting is they sell cell phone insurance. I couldn't think of anything more dry or more whatever. But if you meet people who work for Asurion, my God,
passionate.
They believe in this thing. I'm like, it's just cell phone insurance. But, it's because it's intellectually interesting. It's a competitive market. There are pieces of it that I don't quite understand. But it's one of those look,
when you dropped your cell phone enough times as me, you know the value. I know Asurion really, really well. They're on speed dial with me.
I've had the same cell phone for 8 years. I paid $99 for it. I will not let it go.
That is hilarious.
It's going to be a sad day.
Well, look, I know we're kind of running up to time here. Want to kind of just leave with what would be your kind of advice to people right now who are on the job search? Obviously, it's a tough market. It sounds like you're doing a lot of hiring, which is great. But just thoughts on what people could be doing, maybe stand out more, or just kind of general advice for people who are on a job search.
First of all, the pain is real. I know you highlight this, and I appreciate you don't sugarcoat it. Yeah, there's the economic trends and blah, blah, blah. But then I'm employed now, especially for kind of sit-down corporate jobs. So I appreciate just acknowledging it is what it is. I think the other is people struggle with a reflection of who they are and being honest. And that's tough because sometimes it's true. I mean, that's what you want to say. Sometimes, hey, it is just that you're in the wrong market doing the wrong things, and it is a brutally competitive market. At the end of the day, is asking people that will be honest with you with feedback. Like, I wouldn't say like a mock interview, but hey, Joel, you've worked with me or you've interacted with me time. Tell me straight up, what is it that I do that irritates the crap out of you? How do I, I'll say, hey, you get a bit long-winded and you kind of deviate off the content. We're not good at giving people honest feedback that they are, can do something with. We feel like we need to give them a pep talk, right? Feel good, you're out there, get after it. I think the ability to find somebody, that friend of yours that'll tell you you're being a real idiot, as if everybody else is like, hey, you're doing great, and you think your job as a friend to make them feel better. I do think that kind of real feedback is hard to get because it's hard to give. But if received and internalized, it actually can help. Like if you just say your communication styles are a little aggressive, or you don't seem to apply the points we're trying to make, or you tend to ramble, like how you present yourself is really hard. It's hard to see yourself how interviewers, you see you, because at the end of the day, we interview people all the time, and we very rarely hire the person who's been doing it the longest, right? It's at the end of the interview. Guess what the question I hate we all ask is, well, what do you think? And the answer is, I like them or don't. That's the wrong question, but it's what everybody asks. And likability and presentability matter. And it sounds superficial, but it's just, it's why we buy emotionally.
The best interviewer gets the job, not the best candidate, right?
You're right.
It's
two different skills, and it's tough. So nothing real tactically there.
One of the things you can do, which I think can be helpful for anyone who's listening, is there are some AI tools out there which will do interview prep with you. And the nice thing with AI is it will just tell you like all of this stuff. And if you're not comfortable with using AI in that way, another thing you can do is, if you have a phone conversation, a Zoom conversation, just be by your laptop if you have a phone call and record.
Yep.
Not to hear what they're saying, just to hear what you're saying and be like, all right, am I, like you said, am I kind of like talking too much? Am I getting defensive? Am I not answering a question thoroughly? But yeah, I find this is extremely challenging because it also, I think it's really hard to be honest with yourself. And I think that's why as a society we find it hard to be honest with other people because we don't want to hurt feelings. I think we live in a society that on the whole, we want to, most people I've run into are, they're peacemakers, they want to make people feel good. You don't want to, and unfortunately then we get to, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing in certain cases, but when it comes to self-reflection, man, it's hard for that. And especially on the job search, because at the end of the day, it is just full of rejection. And so you have to be real with that and go, yeah, it is a market thing. It's competitive. There's lots of great people on the market as well outside of me. But then, all right, are there genuinely things I could be doing better? Could I, like you said, present myself better? Can I come across friendlier, whatever it is? So no, it's great advice. Well, Matt, where can people connect with you? Where can people find you?
LinkedIn's fun, right? I mean, that's where I live like everybody else. So I'm a pretty easy guy to find. I'm the only Matt Lowney in Nashville, Tennessee. So anybody like to connect, I will liberally do so.
Love it. And guys, look, what I always say is if you're going to connect with Matt, find him on LinkedIn, be patient. He's not hanging out on LinkedIn nearly as much as I am. But yeah, just say, hey, heard you on the podcast. Be great. And Matt, thanks so much for your time. Glad we're able to figure this out.
Yeah.
And, hopefully later this year at RecFest in Nashville, let's go. Hopefully we'll be able to meet up.
We'll do it, man. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.